First thing here is when you've got, what they want you to have here, when you're looking at contract law, they say like, right, if you're going to have, with Irish law, they're going to say, right, if you're going to have a deal with somebody, that deal is going to be legally binding. You have to tick all these 8 boxes, okay? So when you've got all these 8 boxes ticked, then you've got a contract that's legally binding. So we've got basically just go through it. Very, very straightforward stuff. First 2 there. Now what I would mark, it is quite straightforward, but then we just have to look out for the little subtle things that they could use to keep your grades down. Okay, so the first thing there you've got is an offer and acceptance. Now make sure you mark in this when you're looking out for an offer, right? This when one party asks another party to enter into a deal with them. So you see down there, we're going to go through the 8 elements. First thing there needed is offer. Okay, so if I walk up, so if I email somebody, they're selling a car, and I email them saying a car dealer saying, I'll give you €10,000 for your car. That's my car. That's my offer. If the car dealer says yes, that's their acceptance. And what we have here, guys, when you've got offer and acceptance, can you mark this in the notes? You have agreement then. Okay, so when you have offer and acceptance, the reason this is important is because they said before in the Leaving Cert, in relation to a legally valid contract, explain what agreement is, and students didn't have a clue because it wasn't on their list of 8 elements. Agreement is, guys, is when you have offer and acceptance. Alright, just look out for that. Okay, so agreement is offer and acceptance combined. So again, if I offer somebody 10 grand for their car, they say yes, that's it then, that's it done. If I offer someone €10,000 for their car and they say, no, give me 11,000, that's a counter offer. They rejected the 10,000 offer and they responded by saying, give me 11,000, that's your counter offer there. Okay, so the next thing then, so this is with Irish law. Now, one other big thing to mark in before we move on from that, you can see that there, an offer may be in writing, it may be verbally, or maybe by your behaviour. So if I walk up to a shop and I'm buying a can of Coke or something, I put the can of Coke down and the money down beside it, that's my behaviour. I haven't said it and haven't put it in writing, but they know by my behaviour that I want to buy the can of Coke. So just look out for that. Offer can be, the offer and acceptance can be done in 3 ways. Verbally, in writing, or by your behaviour. That's all it is. One other little last thing to look out for as well is an invitation to treat. And draw an R beside that there, you see it under there, see the note, the big box in the middle of page 7, invitation to treat. That's just if you see a price tag beside like a shirt in a shop. Okay, imagine this shirt costs 50 quid and if the price tag is on it, it says €5 by mistake, that's an invitation to treat. If I walk in, give them 5 quid in the shop and say, look, I want to buy that shirt, they do not have to sell it to me, okay? So what you want to write this down in the notes, guys. A price tag is not an offer. It's considered an invitation to treat, and it's like a suggested price. It's like an offer to make an offer. They're saying like, look, offer us 50 quid for it, we might accept. But it protects the shop. The reason it's not seen as legally by an offer, it just protects the shop in case they put the wrong price tag on it. So imagine if it was like a car that was meant to be sold for 20 grand and they put the car at 200 quid by mistake. Of course, they don't have to sell it to you for 200. So a price tag is not an offer. It's known as an invitation to treat. And see the bottom sentence there, the seller is free to reject any offers made by the consumer. Highlight that, make sure you mark that in there, okay? So when you walk up to buy something in the shop, you're the one making the offer. And they accept it by taking the money off you, okay? That's fine. Nothing else really there, okay? So we jump on there, guys. It's fairly straightforward stuff. Next thing there in the notes, guys, you'll see consideration. And highlight this in the notes there. Something of value is exchanged between both parties. Okay, so remember again, the keywords here, consideration. And a good example is, for example, John pays Mary 500 quid in exchange for her car. If they ask you to give an example of consideration, you get full marks for that, okay? John gives Mary 500 quid, Mary gives John the car. They've both exchanged something of value, that's consideration done. Okay, intention of contract, okay? Now, what you mark in there with intention of contract is both parties intend on entering a legally binding contract. And this is quite confusing, okay? So make sure, see what we're doing, guys, just going to keep ticking off these things, okay? Remember again, with Irish law, if you want to have a contract that stands up in court, you need to tick all of these 8 boxes, okay? So both parties need to exchange something. The next thing there, guys, is intention of contract, okay? Now, what you want to make sure there, what they're looking out for here is that the big word to spot here on this, guys, is you really must be aware that you know in advance going in that you're entering into a legally binding contract, and you're aware, right, if I break any of the rules here, if I break any of the terms of this contract, I could end up in court, okay? So that's the key word there, intention of contract. you must be aware in advance that what the deal you're entering into is going to be legally binding and enforceable by law. And the way it's looked at is Irish law will assume that any agreements made between friends and family are initially considered not to be legally binding. Okay, so like example, if I said to my brother, okay, look, I'll help you move your house or move house or something like that. And if I don't show up or anything like that, there's no angle you can take me to court over it. But imagine if my brother hired a company to help him move house or something like that, and they didn't show up to help him, well then he's got recourse and he can go against them. So the assumption is in Irish law, agreements made between friends and family are not legally binding, but agreements made outside of that is. That's the broad assumption. Of course there's exceptions to that, but you don't need to overthink it or look into too much detail, just have that bit of detail. Irish law assumes that agreements between friends and family are not legally binding, business agreements are assumed to be legally binding. But you must be aware, so another angle there is you must be aware of what you're entering into is a legally binding contract. Okay, it's enforceable by law. Okay, that's you want to make sure you spot. Next one then is capacity to contract. What you have to make sure there, you've got the two things when you're offering to capacity to contract. The examiner's going to be looking out for keywords here is every party in entering into the deal must have the power and legal ability to do so. So if you're entering into a contract, you must be over 18, you must have stable mind, you can't be under the influence of like alcohol or drugs or anything like that, and that's your power and legal ability. Okay, so make sure again, capacity to contract, you must be capable of entering into a contract. You must be over 18, you must be sane, your mentality, you can't be under the influence of drugs, alcohol or any substances when you're entering into contract, or you can't be insane or anything like that. Okay, that's we have there at that. Okay, your capacity to contract, and it's really easy in the Leaving Cert. If you're in they explain the say for like 10 marks, they might say explain capacity to contract. Say all parties entering into the contract must have the power and legal ability to do so. Okay, you write that down, you get 4 marks. Then they say if you say something like the person must be over 18, 3 marks for that, and they cannot be under the influence of alcohol and drugs, and they or be insane. Another 3 marks for that, you're on 10 out of 10. You don't need tons and tons of info on it, okay? So you might notice, you might see some marking schemes or some books and loads of stuff on it. They're the key points that you have there in that, okay? You've got the other point there, if you're looking down there, it's like ultra virus, diplomatic immunity. Numbers 3 and 4 are like, read over them, have an idea on it, but you can separate them. Point 1 and 2 there under capacity to contract is hugely important. 3 is just ultra virus, that's if companies acting beyond their powers. So like with a memorandum association, like you could say like with us, our school, Dublin Academy of Education, they operate within like education, so they can't be entering into contracts to dealing with things outside of education. Okay, that's ultra virus and you act beyond your powers. And then the other one then is diplomatic immunity, and that's just some diplomats, like an American diplomat isn't subject to Irish contract law because the Irish law doesn't apply to them. Okay, don't need them in as much detail. Okay, the key parts going back to this is what I highlight there in the notes. Okay, consent to contract. Okay, a few key words they're going to be looking out for there, but the key one to mark there in the notes and highlight there is free will. Okay, so if you're looking over there to the next page there, consent to contract, all parties entering a contract must do so under their own free will. Okay, so make sure you mark that in. Consent to contract, you must enter into the contract voluntarily. Okay, so everybody entering into contract must do so under their own free will, and they must do so voluntarily. They're like the key words. Okay, if you're Leaving Cert, you explain, they might say, give an example of consent to contract, and all you need to use there is a few key words, like say, e.g. you cannot be intimidated into selling your own house. So someone can't knock on your house with a gun or something and say, I'd like to buy your house. So you, obviously, what you see out there is intimidation, and even if you do agree to sell the house, you prove, look, this person bullied me, threatened me, intimidated me to sell the house, then the contract is invalid. Okay, so the keywords there to make sure you mark in there is when you're explaining the example, they say give an example of consent to contract, you say something like you cannot be intimidated into selling your own house, and that gets you the full mark. But draw a box, you see the notes there, draw a box around those words, threat and intimidation. You'll see like later on the market schemes how they work. That's what they'd have there. Okay. The extreme example is just an example of how students waste time. You don't need all that information. Okay. Some student wrote something similar to that before in an exam, an incredible waste of time. Okay. Just you can keep the examples short and snappy. Remember, time management is going to be an issue in the exam. Okay. So you need to make sure quick, efficient examples. Next one there, guys, number 7 there, legality of form. And some contracts must be in written form in order for them to be legally valid. So there's proof, okay? So something, if you want to write that in there in the notes, guys, something like, beside point number 7, legality of form, write in there an employment contract, okay? So employment contract I might have at the school, and that then again, that would make our contract legally valid. But they have to give me an employment contract. Okay, so they have to give me something in writing saying what my wages is, what my all my entitlements, my duties, my responsibilities. It's all in written contract. So again, it's written form, so there's proof of the deal. And then the last thing then, guys, you see there, number 8, guys, is, and right beside there, legality of form, right there is one other quick thing there, back onto number 7, just right there, like a sale of house. Okay, so there's proof. Okay, so if you're buying a house or sale of property or any insurance policies, it's in writing, so there's proof of that. And the last one then, guys, is legality of purpose. And simple enough, any actions, any contracts involving illegal actions are invalid. And that's all you need to remember. Legality of purpose. If it's illegal actions like something like drug smuggling, of course then the contract is invalid. All right. So if you make a contract with someone that involves breaking the law, well then of course that contract is not enforceable by law. Okay, very, very easy stuff. But guys, your job, right, when you're going on this, it's all about keywords. Okay, remember, make sure again, when the examiners are grading this, you'll be looking out for those keywords. I've thrown up on the board. You pick them off around your examples, and you'll get full marks.